It's time for Push to Play, your weekly trophy podcast with Mindy and CJ.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us for episode 24 of Push to Plat. Have you had a good week? I hope so. Have the trophies been good? Always, I'm sure. Mindy, how are you this week?
Rested.
You're awake, I hear.
Yes.
I heard you might have had a nap in last week's episode. Is that true?
No. It wasn't really, so I did the Mo Game Con. What I didn't say was I woke up at 3 a.m. So by the time we recorded, I had been up for 18 or 19 hours. And, I had a full day of selling at this con. That takes energy. You deal with people. And then, this was, it was a good probably half-hour drive from where I live. So I had to drive back. Actually, I'm taking care of my my parents' house right now. They're out of town. So I went over. I watered their lawn because it's disgusting here, and all the plants would have died. And then I booked it back to my apartment, and I was still like 10 minutes late for the recording. But it wasn't Sam's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. I just it got to a point where you guys were talking, and there was some sort of rhythm, and I just I blinked, and then I opened my eyes and I realized I had lost the thread of the conversation, which is not good.
Well, I'm sure it was nice and warm there. You just drifted off. Well, look, I had some good feedback. There was a lot of interest in who would have thought, in trophy competitions amongst trophy haulers. So there you go. That was fantastic. And look, I think we did pretty well because I was a little bit sick last week, listeners, and we did record another episode which we're going to fix up because I was pretty much off my head. I think on some medications.
You really were.
I
wasn't
really
going to say anything.
Yeah.
You were off your. I shouldn't say off your meds because you were very much on some meds.
Well, it's just different meds, I think, yeah. But, the funny thing is I decided rather than go to the hairdresser and have a glass of wine, I should maybe go to the doctor. And it turns out that I have pleurisy, which is, apparently it's not just, adding S's to every word every now and then. It's like a mild form of pneumonia or something. So it was probably good that I did go. But as a result, I'm not supposed to laugh too much, listeners, because it does incredibly hurt on my left side. But look, I think we're just going to have to avoid that today because I'll suck it up and suffer the pain.
Well, it's good that you got someone inherently boring on the podcast today.
Oh snap! I'm getting better, surely. So look, there's no segue here. I'm sorry. So look, could we please welcome our guest for today, host of PG Spoilers, the flagship podcast for the Proven Gamer Network, the only podcast on the Proven Gamer Network with PG in the title. He's a trophy whore, trophy hunter, comic book aficionado, games expert, reviewer. Yeah, reviewer as well. Look, so much. ResidentDarrell, how are you today?
What's up, nerds and dorks?
No,
I'm just kidding. Thanks, man.
You got me there. I actually was going to do that myself, but I completely forgot.
So, thanks for having me on the show, CJ. Man, I'm a day. I guess I found you guys probably second episode, so I've been a long time listener, and I am glad to be here.
We are glad to have you.
Long time listener, first time caller.
But this is not his first podcasting rodeo by any stretch of the imagination. You're a well-seasoned, trophy podcast guest, though, aren't you?
Yes. So I am the longest running guest on the Trophy Horse podcast. That's why they refer to me as the Proven Gamer Podcast Champion of the World. I have been. I've done various gaming podcasts myself. We started off with PG Spoilers. Not PG Spoilers, but Proven Gamer. doing a show called Remember the Loot, and we did about 77 episodes. And then we decided we were going to change things up, be a little crude, a little rude, about 10 times more offensive. And then we decided to launch our own podcast called The Loot Bros. I know we changed it up a lot. And it was basically a 1-to-1, the exact same show. and we rebranded to do the exact same show. And it was a colossal failure. And so throughout, so just a little bit of a little timeout. I reached out to Tricky and I saw that no one was really doing anything with PG spoilers. And it was kind of the butt of all the jokes on Proven Gamer. And I was like, hey, man, I got some ideas for PG spoilers. You should let me handle the show. And so you did. Me and Tricky are good buddies. Leaving Proven Gamer wasn't necessarily my idea or an idea I was fully supportive of. But the Loot Bros wanted to go do something different. And then when we decided we weren't bros anymore, I went back asking for forgiveness to Proven Gamer and then rebranded and launched the flagship show of the network, and it is by far the most successful thing on the internet today, according to at least me.
Clearly. So could you just for the listeners that don't know the show, it's a very broad church of a show, isn't it? Like you cover a lot of different angles, not only games, I mean comics, movies, music as well. So I mean, I've been listening now for a couple of months, I think. So is that the usual format, like a review type roundtable?
Yeah. So the elevator pitch was between myself and Basehead Hex. I reached out to him. I said, hey, bro, I got this idea. I said, what if we take all of the conversations we have amongst ourselves, I said, and we just slap some microphones in front of us. So if we're talking about this Netflix series that we both watched and we're giving each other our opinions and like, you know what I'm saying? Like essentially we were reviewing the shows to each other or, whatever. And then I was like, let's do it on the show. I was like, and then if we're both playing a video game or we're reading comic books or just whatever. I said, there's such the degrees of separation between a gamer and people who read comics, people who the anime nerds, people who watch Netflix series, things like that. Like all those, they're not different people, and that's one of the things that I wanted to kind of like grab a hold of was the internet didn't need another PlayStation trophy centric show between Push to Plat, the Platcast, and the Trophy Whores. And then of course you got Sacred Symbols and then things like that. I was like, the market was a little cornered and and Loot Bros and Remember the Loot, we were essentially a PlayStation podcast, even though our tagline was, it was just a general video game podcast, completely fair and unbiased. We were extremely unfair and extremely biased to the PlayStation. So essentially we were just an off-brand PlayStation show. And so I told him, I said, I wanted to do something a little different so that it'd be a little something for everybody. So with PG Spoilers, it is a spoiler show. It's a review show where two guys get together, whether we have guests or not, whether we do the same topic or not. We come together and we just do a breakdown, long form of what we thought about a topic, a game, a movie, show. And we've covered things like the show Happy on Netflix. We did a review of the first season. And then we did, and that was originally a comic book. So I've done a few different Batman comic books. I've done, let's see, we're doing tomorrow night, we're actually recording a podcast reviewing a movie called The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot.
Oh,
let that one sink in. And it sounds absolutely absurd. And just a little spoiler, I really enjoyed the movie. But so we just, the idea was Hector and I, we go a long way back doing music, and we always try to like challenge each other to find the next like weird and absurd thing. And like, for just like a little background on me, I'm not like a overly I'm a pretty conservative person, and I try not to get like too disgusting with things that are on the internet. You know what I'm saying? Like I have like some hard boundaries. Hector, on the other hand, has no boundaries, and the weirder and the grosser it is, the more it just like, really gets him going. And so he's always coming to me with these absurd movies that he finds. And one of them was called Swiss Army Man.
Mm-hmm.
and he did a solo review on that one because I was like, no, I'm good. But basically, this dude rides a dead body across the ocean, and as it's basically like fart propelling it, it's like gases just constantly coming out. And he rides a dead body like a jet ski. So like, to give you a little taste on the kind of things you'll find on the show, we'll talk about games and trophies and trophy trash, spam, all that stuff. We'll talk about really absurd movies and series on Netflix. I'll talk about more grounded stuff. You know what I'm saying? I'm really big into comic books and things like that. So we try to do a little bit of everything for all of the nerds and dorks. And we do have friends and guests and co-hosts that will be covering like more anime stuff like that. Cause like, I'm not a huge anime fan, but one of my old co-hosts from the Loot Bros was just like, that's what he preferred, so we always joked about his waifu pillows and husbando blankets and things like that. So we try to have a little something for all the nerds and dorks out there, and we have a really fun time doing it. So
I like that. I mean, it's important to do stuff that you're passionate about, isn't it? Because I mean, when you try and find an angle, because as you say, I mean, everything's already been done, so you can really only do what what interests you, I suppose. And I think I hope that's what Mindy and I are achieving. But it's funny that you mentioned sacred symbols, because when we started, because I wanted to do this for ages, but just I put it off or didn't have the opportunity or the right people around or whatever. And I sent Colin Moriarty a message and just said, I'm thinking about doing this. Can you give me any tips? And obviously not on the level they're doing it, because this is totally a passion project. Can you give me any tips or whatever else about it? And maybe some insight into where you get info and stuff like this. And he was really nice and very helpful or whatever else. And then his final comment though was, whatever you do, if you're going to do a PlayStation podcast, just talk about PlayStation. Don't cross over Xbox or Switch or any other gaming systems or whatever else, because it'll just get too convoluted. And then his final comment was, and if you do a PlayStation podcast, I'm going to crush you. which he has. No, which is, look, listeners, it's in jest, obviously. I think, Colin is fantastic.
Is that why Colin Moriarty won't come on to the show?
That is not one. That is probably one of the very far reasons on top of a list of many, many reasons. But look, never say never, I suppose. We'll wait and see.
And I'm a big fan of Colin. Like, that dude, he's got like the right sense of humor for me. Like, it's just dry enough, it's just cynical enough, but yet it's just borderline absurd enough that just I look forward to listen to his shows, especially in the PlayStation realm. I've checked out his other stuff, and it's cool. It's whatever. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. But for the most part, like his PlayStation material I'm like a OG Beyond listener. Like, I have listened to every single episode that is currently on the internet of his and Greg's old stuff. And there's like some early episodes that you have to actually go to IGN's website and download. I still have them on my old iPhone, all the way up to their final run. And then I had to bounce because the way the show went was not so great. But when they launched P.S. I Love You, man, that was like I look forward to that so much. So when we started the Loot Bros, very same idea, or excuse me, Remember the Loot, they're totally different shows. But that was kind of the general idea for us, was like, we all looked forward to these shows every week, week in, week out. And we all, like, spoilers, we all work together, and me and all the guys. So we would listen to we like, hey, did you hear the new show? Did you hear the new show? And so it was almost like a race to see who could download, listen to it faster. And then we'd sit back in my office at work, and we just laugh and cut up. And I swore to him, I was like, guys, we are literally throwing away podcast gold. Like, we need microphones in these rooms right now. And man, we had a blast when we started, and like you said, this is a passion project. That's what I'm doing now with PG Spoilers. That's what I've done in the past. It's a passion project, I enjoy doing it. I love podcasting. I freaking love interacting with, community members and people to play games with, and so it's fun, and I love like getting I'm telling you, really want to know something that gets me revved up is getting a boost group of people together to boost trophies based off of like kind of coming from the podcast. I freaking love that stuff, man. It's a cool feeling. It's great people out there. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's. I think that's 100%. Yeah, it is a special thing to be able to do, and as you say, like I mean, since we've been going too, it's amazing. Like it is amazing the people you sort of touch, and I'm always amazed by the just somebody reaches out randomly, and like obviously you had no idea who they were before, and they are. We had a message a few weeks ago, and he said he'd been listening for a while, and he goes, "It feels like I know you two really well," and I was like, "Wow, that's kind of creepy," but
it's the next
nice.
message.
Yeah,
and the next message was, I kind of want to wear your skin for the weekend.
we haven't got to that point yet, but I'm looking forward to that. So, look, we got some questions in today. So why don't we fly across to those? And we've got one here from Boston 10 George LP. Hello, sir. Now this came in on the Twitter, didn't it? So here we go. It says here, if you had to get a tattoo right now, what would it be? Don't count it if you already have one. So who wants to start off? Who wants to throw something out?
Ladies first.
I don't have an answer for this question. I've never had an answer for this question. I've always told people that the only reason I don't have a tattoo is I can't think of a single thing that I would want on my body for the rest of my life. And I know that's kind of a silly thing to say because, now there's like laser surgeries and such to get tattoos removed. I always kind of knew that it would be some sort of like 8-bit video game character because that really kind of defined my childhood. I often leaned towards like Simon Belmont.
Oh,
because I was big on Castlevania as a kid. But also, I played a lot of Mega Man. Darrell, how do you feel about Mega Man?
Oh, I am so glad you asked. I got two things to say to you, Mandy. A, Mega Man freaking sucks. Like, I hate Mega Man. Like, I'm not like when I told you, we might have not been recording yet. When I said you guys were speaking my love language for this show, CJ don't like no Mega Man. Darrell don't like no freaking Mega Man. It's not for me. It's not for me.
Honesty is refreshing.
And then I gotta say, for obviously the follow up, Metroidvanias. The only good Metroidvanias that ever existed are the Resident Evil games, and that's because they're survival horror games with Metroidvania aspects to them. I hope I didn't ruin your your setup.
No, we just covered the topic again for another week. That's fine. CJ knows them. I'm sourcing experts, and they will be on this podcast.
And you will not be asked.
And he will be required to talk to these people.
That's so funny. Now, real talk though, not being dramatic or anything like that. I played some Mega Man when I was younger. It wasn't for me. Just never jived with me, never clicked. So now whenever I hear some of these retro scrubs all the time talking about, oh, my Mega Man, you gotta have my Mega Man. I'm just like, come on, dude. There's so much better out there.
Oh, I'll admit that there's better. It's just, I played Mega Man a lot when I was younger. I've gracefully, aged out of the reaction needed to play Mega Man, I think.
A nice way of putting it.
Gracefully.
So, Darrell, do you already have tattoos?
As a ex pseudo rock star, no. I was the only guy.
Oh.
I was the only guy out of my band. We played metal, by the way. We're a metal band.
I'm guessing you weren't the drummer then.
No, I was the guitar player actually. So
I knew a couple of metal bands in college, and it was always the drummer that had the most tattoos.
Man, our guys were like silly with the tattoos, man. We had they was crazy. But I've always had some ideas for tattoos, and I've always wanted them. But it was one of those things to where it just never worked out. Like it was just one of those things where the timing wasn't right, and or it just didn't work. And it was like similar to you. It was one of those things to where if it's going to be something on my body for the rest of my life, two things are going to happen. A, my body needs to look a little bit better to support this thing. And then B, like I really, really got to love it. And so if you want me to go ahead and answer the question, I have two answers for it. All right. So the first one, I'm going to go throw a silly answer out there. All right. The first one, as soon as you read the question out to me, I thought about this little gag we had with the trophy horrors where we were trying to raise money for Extra Life for Proven Gamer. And I pitched one of the tiers should be that Tricky should get a tramp stamp. And so the running gag was get Tricky a tramp stamp. So on our show at the time, Remember the Loot, we were pushing hard, get Tricky a tramp stamp. And then on all the Facebook groups, we were doing it. And then some of the listeners got really silly with the memes. So they took this random picture of a guy and then put Tricky's head on it and then had like various tramp stamps on there. So if I had to get a tattoo right now, the first thing that popped in my head was I would get a picture of Tricky with a tattoo of a tramp stamp. And if you want to see these pictures, if you go to the Trophy Horse Facebook group and just kind of scroll through the pictures, be warned, they're ridiculous, but they exist.
Yeah, you would definitely live to regret that, I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, I think he really got it. Actually, I think he got a picture, a tramp stamp, and he hasn't really unveiled it yet. I think it's there. So, and then if you want my serious answer, I can throw one of those out too.
Yeah, go for it.
I've got it all laid out and everything, but I had this idea of a little road going up from my ankle to up to the top of my calf, like a little windy dirt road with footprints from my 3 children and like a little passage of scripture that says, train up the child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he won't depart from it. And the highlight of my life, you know what I'm saying, is my children. And I feel like the thing that I do better than anything in this world is I'm a good dad. And so one of the things I've always thought about doing is having and I'll do it eventually, but I'll get my kids' footprints, you know what I'm saying, walking on a path, because that's just something that, it just means a lot to me. And I've been kind of sitting on it for a while. And for a while there, I thought we were going to have like 50 kids. So I was like, man, I'm going to need like another leg or something. And we ended up only having 3, but like I said, timing, it was like, I just got to make sure we're really, really done before I just start, one and done. Let's not go back to the shop every 9 months and get more ink.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I like that. Yeah. So look, Boston 10 George, do you have any tattoos? I wonder what you would get. For me personally, I definitely won't. The thought of getting a tattoo terrifies me. I'm not good with needles or any of that sort of stuff. So I don't think I could deal with the pain. It's probably not that bad. I don't know. But no, it's definitely...
They say it's addicting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't think I hate myself enough yet to go through that. But, we're probably getting close. So we'll have to see. So, look, why don't we move into some gaming now? So, Darrell, now, just before we hit this, I got a little update on the iPhone this morning about that your podcast had dropped, and I thought, oh, it's wonderful. It's like a warm up for today, because it's basically it couldn't have been any closer. And I had to say the Platginity. That's a wonderful name. Sometimes we struggle to come with names here, but Hector's Platginity. And Mindy, just to, because you wouldn't have had a chance to hear this. This was a podcast all about helping Darrell's friend Hector here get his first platinum, which was My Name is Mayo, it was fantastic.
That is right. It happened.
You've definitely come to a place. One of the funniest moments for me at that podcast was where you said, "Just hang on a sec, I'll bring up the guide."
Dude,
yes.
From My Name is Mayo?
We butchered it, man. Like, I edited out probably 20 minutes of us stumbling around dressing up the mayonnaise jar because 2 grown men, one of which was platinum this game twice for myself and once for an old co-host, couldn't do it right the first time.
How?
So, okay, here's what happened. Like, spoilers on the show. We're playing the game and the trophies are not
spoilers for Mayo.
We did a PG spoilers on My Name is Mayo. Yes. And what happened was the trophies weren't popping like immediately. So we were obnoxiously tapping this Mayo jar. And where I'm stationed right now is I have this desk at the upstairs in my house, and I've got like all my recording gear up here and my PC. And so what we did was my kids wanted to camp out in my game room downstairs where we usually record, and they wanted to watch, shows, which is what they're doing tonight, And so I was like, yeah, that's fine. You guys can have the game room. Me and Hector will go upstairs and sit in the really comfortable chairs, and we'll record. So when I brought one of the PlayStations up here, the internet up here is so bad. And I'm like, it should be good. I pay a lot of money for it to be good, and it's all good equipment, but man, it's just so crappy. So for whatever reason, the trophies would not pop and sync in anything. So I kept going to the guide because I'm like, we're doing something wrong. These trophies should be popping. So I'm like, I can't believe I'm having to pull up a guide for My Name Was Mayo. This is so simple, but it made it obviously the experience that much more absurd and funny. And then the platinum wouldn't pop. We did everything and it would not pop. And I was like, what is going on? And so Hector's like, oh my gosh, of course, my first time would be a nightmare. And likening it to his losing his actual virginity. It was really just, we were goofing off, having so much fun. And then, so finally we're like backing out of the game, in and out of the menus. And then out of nowhere, the platinum just pops. So we didn't even have like a big build up, and we didn't get to yell, and it just fell so flat. And it made for fantastic audio.
It did. Well, please pass my commiserations on to Hector, because I know early on in the episode I could hear him furiously tapping away because he was going to try and set a new time record. But obviously that got away from him in that stack.
So bad. And what's funny is we had it all planned out, right? So here comes the last task, the last trophy, and he's got the controller up to the microphone. He's tapping 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10, and nothing. And so we're like, oh, wait, what happened? And so then we just keep on. And then that's when it just all goes off the rails. And so we had this big setup. We had this big plan. Like, it was supposed to be perfect. And it was just a disaster.
I like it. So look, let's turn to you then. So what have you been playing lately?
All right. So shout out to another podcast. Boston George, actually the guy who wrote in, he writes into this one a bunch, so he'll appreciate this. To the Platcast. I've been listening to their show, and they've been playing through the game Bulletstorm. And it's first-person shooter, really absurd mechanics. It's got this awesome leash, this whip that you can grab people with and bring them to you in slow motion and kick them into the environment and blow stuff up. And it's just dialogue is off the walls. And in this remaster on the PS4, they added Duke Nukem, which is one of my childhood heroes, actually. So I'm playing through this game as Duke Nukem and just listening to this ridiculous dialogue, playing this absurd game, laughing my behind off, just having a blast. So I've been playing that lately. You know, I don't know that I'm going to go for the platinum because it seems like a bit of a grind, and there's some multiplayer trophies, and you know, in an age where you can get platinums in 15 and 20 minutes, sticking 30 hours into this game, just, I don't know, it's kind of cheapened the idea for me a little bit. But I've been playing some Bulletstorm, playing some Monster Hunter World with my son and one of his best friends. So his
yes, well, if you don't have 30 hours to spend, why not just spend 500 in Monster World instead?
What's funny is, like, I have these standards, right? And I'm like, I don't play these games if I can't platinum them. And I don't like to start multiple games at one time. And then I also don't like to play these absurdly huge games because I know I'll never finish them. And then as we continue down my trophy list, I've been playing The Witcher 3. No, I'm playing. Go ahead.
Is getting to 1% in a game classified as playing the game now?
You know, I don't know, but I started a really, really great conversation on Facebook today about, in honor of CJ, I was like, I think I'm going to just devalue my trophy list and just do 5% of everything. And right. I was getting, it wasn't really, people, I wasn't getting a lot of positivity back on that one. A lot of please don't.
It does seem to alarm people.
You know, he doesn't, 5% isn't, you know, he doesn't tend to get that anymore. He tends to get, 0 to 4% now.
That's right.
Well, don't worry. I'm right there with him because I loaded up Katamari Forever off of PlayStation Now because I'm like, oh, this sounds like something my daughter would enjoy. Maybe the trophies will pop, and then we booted it up, played it. She's like, Dad, this sucks. I was like, yeah, you're right. So I got one trophy on it. That's a nice 1%. I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Oh, Katamari Forever was my 100th platinum.
Oh my gosh, not for me. Not for me. I'm glad it exists for people who want that to be their 100th platinum, but that wasn't speaking my language. And then I'll just end it with this one outside of like spam games. I loaded up a Red Faction Guerrilla Re-Mastered the other morning. I try to get up and play games before I go to work because that's the only time I'm kind of like left alone in the house, is before everybody wakes up. And so I have a tendency of getting up, starting a game, falling asleep, getting up, back up, and going to work. And so I have 7% of the trophies in this game. So really, really overachiever on that one.
I don't know this game. What is it exactly?
So it was a Xbox 360 PS3 game. It was a THQ game, but it's a third-person action game. No, it wasn't THQ. I lied. It's by the same people who made Saints Row,
It's
Volition.
Volition.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Jeff Hanna, a friend of the Trophy Wars, he actually did the rebar in the buildings. But essentially, it's a third-person open world, you know what I'm saying, like GTA clone kind of thing. But you're on Mars, and you have this giant sledgehammer, and every single building you come in contact with, you can break. And it's got ragdoll physics, and it's got a really nonsensical mission structure, and you just go places, break stuff, blow stuff up, and fetch quests, get trophies, breaking things. It's a fantastic podcast game. If you just want to listen to podcasts or music and then just break stuff with a sledgehammer, oh, it's great.
Oh, it's cool. I haven't come across that one before. Cool. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Well, look, I'm sure we'll get into some spam stuff later on. Mindy, have you been busy this week?
Yes, sir. Well, I know Slam was on last week and talked about the current event going on at PlayStation Trophies, which is Trophy Centipede. So my week was kind of prepping for that. I did do I actually did 6 because I'm an overachiever like that. So I earned 6 trophies.
Did he make you feel bad? Did he?
No, I haven't gotten feedback as to whether or not I did it correctly, even though I'm pretty sure I did.
Oh,
it's always the waiting game. You submit your trophy log, and then you have to wait, and you have to kind of make a backup plan for, well, what if this isn't right, even though I'm pretty sure it is. So because of that, I played mostly spam this week. As much as I hate it, I had to play another stack of Back in 1995 because it had a trophy I needed for the event. Also started up Block of Picks Deluxe, which I'm actually not a huge fan of. I'm not a huge fan of the kind of color fill Picross games. This one, it's mostly because the puzzles get so huge, you really can't keep it all on the screen. And that really throws me off, because while there's a picture on the other side that you can use as kind of a reference, by the time you get to the last page of this game, the actual grid is something like 115 by 70, something like that, something massive. So the kind of big scope picture on the right side of the screen, so you can take it all in at once, you can't see anything on it. It doesn't help. So that's not going to be fun to do, I think. But at least that's on the Vita, so I can, watch Netflix or something while I do that. What else have I done? I played Mochi Mochi Boy just because I wanted to.
Have you not played that yet? Or you did it again?
No, I hadn't done it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I played it. I liked it. It's cute.
Yeah, it is cute. Yeah.
I started OVIVO or OVIVO because it had something.
Yeah, what did you think of that?
Yeah, I mostly like it. There's some questionable checkpointing in it, because
yes,
it's not so much that it's a like a physics platformer. It's more like a oh gosh, I can't think of the word anymore. But the problem is that you get caught up in the rhythm of something, and that's how you get up. You jump gaps and stuff because you can't jump. Your little dot can't jump. The problem sometimes is that you get checkpointed to a spot. Momentum, that's the word I want. You get checkpointed to a spot where if you die, you have lost all momentum, and it's almost impossible to build it back up. And it's almost always by a jump where you need a good amount of momentum to get to the next platform.
Yeah. It's very aggressive checkpointing, isn't it? Like it
really kind of is. That being said, I dig the idea of this game quite a bit. It kind of reminded me, and I'm not entirely sure why, but it kind of reminded me of, what was that game? I'm scrolling through my trophy list right now because I can't quite remember the name of this game. It had to do with shapes, and it was like opening like a storybook full of shapes, and there's no narration in it. It kind of, and I'm not entirely sure why, but it reminded me of Gorgoa.
Oh, yes.
Which is another game that kind of dealt with shapes, I guess. I like the idea of OVIVO, where it's a massive picture, and then you're zoomed in and that's the level and you're just making your way around the curves of this picture. I kind of wish it was more not recognizable picture, but yeah, like actual pictures. Like if they had taken like a stained glass window or like, The Last Supper or something, like you're doing artwork as opposed to art that was just drawn for the game. I think that would have made it a little more interesting, because as it is, it's just a lot of spikes.
That is a cool idea, though. Yeah.
Oh no, it's very cool. I was when I was
but some of the
playing,
pictures
I
are
was
cool as
thinking,
it zooms out.
well, what if
They're
this
cool.
was the Mona Lisa or something? What if I kind of got stuck on that? What if this was actual art? Like famous artwork.
Yeah. Now, look, if we're going to talk about that game, we have to talk about the menu. Well, what did you think of the menu system?
It can be a little confusing, because there's
just a little.
nothing's written. It took me a minute to catch on to what it was doing. It's interesting how it keeps track of collectibles, in as much as it's super annoying to figure out. Thankfully, Velvet wrote a guide on PlayStation trophies explaining exactly how you can tell if you've gotten everything in the stage. It has to do with the size and the color of the dots on the pause screen.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, interesting.
It's kind of annoying.
Yeah.
What else did I play? I played an Artifacts Monday game. I played Eventide 2, and I did that for the event, and I was kind of surprised I hadn't played that. Out of all the Artifacts Monday games that I have played, that one I had not played.
Did you use your own guide?
I didn't write a guide for that one.
Oh, you didn't do the guide for that one? Okay.
No, I did not. I don't think I did. I think I only did a guide for Eventide 3. Okay. But there is a very good walkthrough by Jay Meeks over on PlayStation Trophy, so shout out to him. He definitely put more effort in formatting his guide than I tend to, in as much as he actually wrote out every button prompt you need and put pictures in the guide. And I don't. I try to avoid pictures as much as possible because I'm lazy.
Another overachiever. Excellent.
Oh, yes. And then, what's the last thing I played for funsies? Oh, I finished up the Assassin's Creed Odyssey DLC, and I'm kind of worried because apparently the last, what's it called? The last additional feats trophy is live.
That's correct, yeah.
But it is definitely not spawning in my game. So I am very, very, very worried. And also, apparently I can't delete this damn thing yet because Discovery Mode's coming out in like September, and they're going to put trophies with it.
Yes.
So,
oh, I didn't realize you were having trouble, because I noticed you're missing just one trophy, but it's that trophy, is it the final story one? Free story one.
Yeah.
That's
and
quite a nice little story too.
I'm really, really, really nervous about it because I put so much time into this game.
Yes. Yeah. Well, look, we're going to have to take a little sidebar here. Sorry, Darrell. We're probably boring you here with our long game talk. But look, it's rare that I finish a game like this. Do you know where your clock sits in this game, Mindy? Roughly, how many hours to this point?
I kind of don't want to say because it's sad.
Okay, well, look, I'm going to say, and mine tipped over at 100 hours the other night. So mine finished at 104 hours. Now, there are obviously some idling time in there, but probably not a lot. So it is a massive game, isn't it? Once you complete all the DLC.
Yeah, mine was over 100 as well.
So what did you think?
Not too far from yours.
No. Well, look, I'm a special gamer. I take a little longer than everyone else, but there's nothing wrong with that. So, what did you think of the final, the conclusion of the Fate of Atlantis final expansion?
Yeah, I don't know. It felt kind of off to me, but I'm not entirely sure why. Part of it is it's Atlantis, so if you know mythology at all, you know what's going to happen at the end of it. I don't know how this all ties into the main story of the game, not Odyssey, but like Assassin's Creed as a whole, because Layla who's the modern day person, was a lot more involved in this DLC than I thought she would be.
Yes.
And I kind of went from having no opinion of her to finding her to be annoying by the end of this.
Well, they've set her up as a central character going forward, I think, now as well. So, yeah, by the end, yeah. So it will be interesting to see You may be in for much more frustration in your future.
Although Desmond kind of started getting on my nerves at the end too.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, listeners, we won't spoil it or anything. Other than just say, did you find one thing that really surprised me in this the Fate of Atlantis expansion was the boss battles. I thought were really well done. I thought the combat, by and large, is still the same as the base game, but there were just different things at play. It was a little bit more involved, I thought, and I thought that was refreshing. Did you feel that? Did you enjoy those, or without sort of spoiling them?
Those boss battles came down to have a good bow and just get out of the way, and just
It's true. Yeah.
Pelt them with your bow, and then go into your inventory and craft more arrows. I think that was what I did. That's definitely what I did for the final boss of the 3rd episode. It's what I did for Cerberus in the 2nd episode. Yeah, that's kind of what half of the boss battles this game came down to was, have a decent hunter stat and a good bow and just get out of the way. Because otherwise you have to wait for, it's like that old NES pattern recognition. Like, you have to wait for this really long attack pattern, and then you can run in and hit him a couple of times and maybe get a good charge shot in. Whereas with the bow, you can just take pot shots from the side.
That's true. I mean, it was a little cheap. I found that final boss battle if you did run in and you sort of, you didn't get out of the way quick enough, or you got a little unlucky and swarmed, it could be a little cheap. So, I definitely think that ranged attack is a good point. Isn't it amazing that there's no auto crafting option or a button combination you can push while you're in the fight to recraft arrows? You actually have to go out to the menu and do that.
It's always kind of weird. It's always kind of weird to me because you got to remember that you're in a computer simulation. So while it makes sense that you can just on the fly craft 70 arrows at one time because you're in a computer simulation, so you can just give yourself more arrows. At the same time, you're like, well, why can't I just map this to a button? If I'm in a computer, I can do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, do these games? I know, Darrell, you avoid these games because of the time and just life and general and stuff. But do they have any like draw to you or not? Even if you had the time, they wouldn't interest you.
I haven't played the last few of them. I stayed pretty current on Assassin's Creed. I played the first one on Xbox 360, and then I feel like I got like 700 achievement points or something like that, and then my profile corrupted. Mm-hmm. So like I started a new one, and then when I went back to play it a second time, I was just like, nah, I'm not doing all this again. And then part 2 I played a little bit of, but it wasn't the right time. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes that stuff is like, you're just not in the mood for an open world collectathon when it comes to those little ribbons or whatever. I played a little bit, like the standard 5% of the little side stories, and then Assassin's Creed 3. But I tell you, the one I loved the most out of all of them was Assassin's Creed Rogue, and that was the whenever.
Oh, really?
Yeah, whenever. What's that one that was butchered on when the PS4 and the Xbox One came out? The what's it called?
Liberation?
No. There was that one that came out where you could do multiplayer Assassin's Creed. It launched on the console.
Oh, Unity.
Yeah. When Unity came out, it was like super broken. On the old gen, they released Assassin's Creed Rogue, which has been remastered for current gen now. And that one is, it played well. It controlled very well for an Assassin's Creed at the time. And it had the ship combat stuff that everybody loved in Black Flag. And I don't know what it was. It was just, I don't know if it was time and place or what, but I rented that game just to try it out, on the Redbox. And just a random, hey, I'm here grabbing movies for me and the wife. I'm going to try this game out. And, dude, I couldn't put it down. I burnt through that game and just had a blast.
I liked Rogue, too. I'm gonna spoil some stuff here. He was interesting. What was his name? Shay, right?
Yeah.
He was interesting, especially coming off the back of Connor, who I thought was super boring.
Super boring, yeah. Well, I don't know what it was about him, but he reminded me of Gambit from the X-Men, like Remy LeBeau. I don't know why. I just in my mind, I'm role playing as Remy. I was just like, this dude reminds me of Gambit.
Well, because he wasn't this whiny dude. I thought he was interesting because if you play Assassin's Creed 3, the first like 4 hours of the game, you're playing as someone else. You're playing as Hathan, who is a assassin who is secretly working as a Templar, right? And has been for a while. and that's the reveals that you didn't know he was working for a while. What I liked about Shay was he is an assassin through and through at the very beginning of the game, and then probably about a quarter of the way through, he's like, you know what? You guys are just as awful as the Templars. Yep. I liked that. It was very much,
I did too.
Prior to that, it was very much assassins are good, Templars are bad.
Templars are bad.
And then you started seeing this other side of like, well, you guys both have good points, and you both have some really bad flaws. So I liked that about Shay. What I thought was really, really cool about Rogue is that the ending of Rogue goes seamlessly into the beginning of Unity.
Oh, wow. See,
it's really, really, really cool. And I don't think you would remember it unless you played them.
So on the NA store right now, it's only like $14, $15 right now. Yeah, the remaster.
Is it really? I might have to pick that up.
Yeah, I was thinking about doing the same thing because I got a chunk of the trophies on PS3, but I was kind of like, my intentions weren't to go for the platinum, and then I've got it still. I actually went and bought it. It's still in the wrapper, because I rented it when I originally played it. I really liked it, and I was like, I'll just wait for it to come out on PS4. Surely that'll happen. And it took them a few years. I was very surprised that they held back as long as they did, because I felt like that was one of the strongest titles.
I wouldn't mind replaying Rogue again. I got Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered free with the season pass of Odyssey. Not going to touch that again, but Rogue, yeah, I think I'll do that one again.
Yeah, I wasn't the biggest fan.
Maybe you should wait, because they seem to have a tendency to include a remaster for free in the season pass, don't they? So maybe next year's Assassin's Creed will come with Rogue. You never know.
I thought the whole reason why there's so much content for Odyssey is there's not one coming out next year.
That's what I heard, but
well, then the year after, perhaps.
Yeah. But then again, there might be a remaster in Black Flag by then. So.
Gosh, yeah, it would be PS5.
Hey, as long as if they cut the multiplayer out, I would be more than happy to play Black Flag again. I had a lot of fun with that one.
See, I have it. I never started that one. And then once the quote unquote
play it. It's fun.
Once the patches were fixed for Unity, I played a decent amount of Unity, but I just don't remember it. Like I wasn't really paying attention, I guess, when I was playing it. And I liked what I played. I just kind of fell out of it. And then I own. What was the one that came after that? It was with the brother and the sister. Syndicate. Yeah, I own Syndicate. I haven't played it either, and that's where I stopped. I kept buying them, but then not necessarily getting around to playing them. I've always enjoyed Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where I kind of like, after a while you start seeing all these games pile up on your shelf, and my digital library, it's pretty massive too. I was like, maybe I'll just wait. $10-15. I'll grab it, and it can sit on my shelf with the rest of them.
Yeah, that's right. For a rainy day. That's good. Yeah. That's good. That's good, Mindy. Was that sorry to take off on a tangent there, but we're good at that. Anything else you want to throw out, Mindy? Or
I think that's all I played this week. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, listeners, I did draw that little bit out a bit, because I've really been playing nothing other than Assassins, so we don't need to talk about that. But I did finish it. Ironically, my last trophy was one of the sort of collecty the riffs in the second episode of the final expansion, which I almost thought about just not doing, because I didn't really enjoy it. But that would have been trivial to leave 10 minutes of work on a 100-hour game undone. So I did do that, but that was fun. So look, as usual, now I have no idea what I want to play. But as Darrell sort of said, one of the disadvantages of having whatever you want to play is that you don't know what to start. And so you start everything and you don't stick to it. But I went back to, Persona 3 Dancing Moonlight. So it's obviously a rhythm game, very easy rhythm game. These came out, was it last year, I want to say? The 3, 4, or another remaster or reporting of 4 and 5. And look, it's great. It's my final stack of it, I think. We're on the Asian stack this time. So, if you played that game, it's great. If you haven't, it's worth playing, even if you don't play the Persona games. I don't play them myself. But as for rhythm games, they're quite fun, and the songs are good. There's a great mix. I think 3 has the majority of the songs across 4 and 5, more than the others. So that's worth it. What did I do? I did the tutorial of Dragon Quest Builders. That was a lovely hour. So we'll see. I'm not sure. It's a lovely idea, that game. So Minecraft for adults with a story mode. But I don't know.
I just picked it up for my kids, and they played 15-20 minutes of it, and were like, I don't know. It's friggin' Fortnite. Just I swear, it's like if they don't get in and get going immediately, they have no patience for this stuff. And I'm like, come on, guys, you're gonna love this game. Just try it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna sit down with them this weekend and go.
I think it's one of those games where you have to invest about 4 or 5 hours just to get your head around it all, and then you're really into it, and it takes off. But I did play the first one. I thought the first one was really good. It surprised me. The problem I had with the first one, we talked about this a while ago with Velvet, was that there was a time limit. That was part of, I mean, you could take as long as you wanted, but you were supposed to meet a certain time limit on each chapter, which really destroyed the game. This is a much more open game. There is no time limit, which it should be. It's a building game, and a crafting game. You should be able to take as long as you want. So it's a much more natural attrition. I don't think there's any missables, listeners, in this game. It is quite long, though. I think 50 plus hours for the plat, but it's just something to chip away at. So having moved through all that, I decided it was time to start Shadow of the Tomb Raider, because why not? Coming off a massive open world game, we should go to a linear game, I feel. So, and look, it's noticeably linear after Assassins, but only a couple of hours so far. Look, it is fantastic. This is Eidos Montreal. This was a couple of studios, this game, wasn't it? Square in Japan, I think, touched it as well. So, look, it's great. I don't know. Have you played this at all, Darrell? Or I don't know if Tomb Raider's your...
I own it.
Yeah. Oh, you...
I own it. I
Good.
did.
So did I.
It's a very common thread.
Yeah.
No, I have it. It's on my shelf. It looks fantastic there. I have not finished Rise of the Tomb Raider.
No.
So again, you'll find a common thread with me is I like to make excuses why I haven't started a game, because I want to finish the last one, but 5%. It's easy to get 5%.
It is. Well, Rise is quite long, and I played that first snow section probably 4 times, so there was no way I was going to go back to that. I'm done. I've seen enough of that game. So I thought I'd start this. This is apparently a lot shorter. I think the story is only 12 to 13 hours, and I have no interest in the platinum here, listeners, because I'm not going to do a hard mode, and I'm also not going to farm kills and collectibles and stuff. But as far as the story goes, it's great so far. I think it's been a while since I've played an Uncharted-esque sort of traipse through the Amazon tombs type game and exploring sort of thing. And as I said, it is very linear, but it's a good counterpoint to Assassins, because it's very easy to follow the story because it's just continuous. You're not spending 20 hours going off here riding your horse to see what's on the other side. This pushes you along. So look, I'm enjoying it, and I'm sure I have more to say than on that as we go. But yeah, that's been it so far. So that's enough. That's enough for me, I think. That's enough from me, I think. So, look, why don't we go across? Because I do want to really move to the topic. Listeners, we had a look at the new releases, but there's not a lot coming out at the moment. So, with the exception of Bus Simulator, if you're European, I'm sure you're excited by that. I'm sure Mindy is not, probably Darrell not either. But I don't think.
Look, if I'm gonna play a bus simulator game, I'm gonna play Desert Bus. Thank you.
Oh, Desert Bus, yeah. Well, these simulator games, if you like them, they're supposed to be really good. I know that the train simulators are massive and stuff. So, like if you've been hanging out since the start of the PlayStation 4, generation for this game, because this is the first one to be ported, I believe, then it has finally come, and enjoy it in all its 4K mastery. If it is for you.
I just picked up Farm Simulator, like whatever the most recent one is. I got it sitting on my shelf. I haven't even put it in.
Those games are more complicated than you think, trust me. Yeah, they're not arcadey at all. The sim is true in those games.
Well, what was funny is I kind of got it when my wife found it, and she was like, "Oh, you should get this for my daughter." And my daughter's 7. And she loves Goat Simulator, but I don't think she realizes that all simulators are not created equal. And Goat Sim is a special type of game.
Yes.
So we picked it up, and it's just sitting there. I was like, yep, that's just like everything else.
Yeah.
I can't get mad because that's what I do too.
I like it. So look, that's our new releases. I don't think, Mindy, there was nothing you wanted to talk about particularly, was there? No, cool. So we'll just do that. And look, we're going to burn through the news as well, because I think we're going to get stuck on the topic for a while, which will be awesome. So, again, look, some random, information coming out. Concrete Genie, of course, we heard a little bit more about that this week, coming out on the 8th of October. It will have VR support. Is anyone anticipating this game, or has anyone followed it?
I followed it a little bit, and it's one of those games that a lot of the podcasts are raving about. Like they can't wait, can't wait, can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it'll be good. I don't know that I'll pick it up on release because I got Moss and Astrobot, and I haven't barely started either one of them. I don't even know if I've put in Moss yet. I can't remember.
Moss is fantastic. You should definitely.
That's what I hear. It'll happen eventually. It's one of those games that I get motion sick really easy, so I can't play a lot of VR for very long. 30 minutes and I got to kind of bounce. I get kind of queasy easy. So I'm really excited to play Moss, and but I just haven't committed to it yet.
Yeah. No, the motion sickness is not bad at all in that game. So yeah, we'll look out to it. I believe it can be played outside of VR, that game as well. So it'll be something for everybody. Now, coming off the back of,
I don't think it
can't
can.
Be.
Moss.
Oh no, sorry, I'm talking about Concrete Genie.
No,
sorry.
I don't think it can, because I definitely would have played it by now.
Yes. Yeah.
If it could, because I really, really, really want to play it.
Yes.
And yeah, it's definitely VR is definitely required for it, which is a shame because I don't have it.
So sorry, listeners, I misspoke. Yeah, Moss is definitely VR, but I believe Concrete Genie will be playable just on PS4, optional with VR. Yeah, sorry about that. And then look, coming off the back of last week where we talked about, tax minimization and all things like that, and my accountant wasn't present. How lovely. So I'm sure I'll still get a bill somehow. So, look, and this is we've been touching on this for the last couple of weeks. So this is an interesting sort of story, although perhaps not surprising. The ESA says Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft will require disclosure of loot box odds sometimes in 2020. So they're obviously moving to self-regulate to stay ahead of potential issues. Does this surprise either of you?
Nope.
No, what I find interesting, honestly, is so sometimes I play that Simpsons mobile game, Tapped Out, which is run by EA.
Mm-hmm.
And there are these there's like a racetrack, you give it $100 of in-game money. Like you can't buy this kind of, I guess you can, but you wouldn't buy this kind of money because you get it. There's nothing to spend it on in the game. And, you pick a random dog and it's RNG as to whether or not you win. If you win, you get your money back 20-fold. And if you don't, you're just out the in-game money. And I did notice this past week that they've started putting odds on, like percentage odds on each of the choices. And I thought that was interesting. So I don't know if that was kind of a pilot, like a little tester to be like, all right, let's put odds on this gambling stuff we have in our game, or what?
What do they call it? What did that woman call it? The surprise boxes? The
surprise mechanics.
Surprise
That's so gross. So gross.
Well, it'll be less surprising now if you already have a 0.001% chance of getting it. So.
Those are spoiler mechanics.
That's right, spoiler mechanics. Yeah. Look, I don't know. I mean, that's obviously they're trying to safeguard against further scrutiny. So yeah, that will be interesting. And then look, the last point of news, which I think obviously you're not allowed to do it. It's news to me, but it does pose some interesting questions if you're having problem winning ranked matches in Mortal Kombat 11. There may be a strategy that you can employ, and it's gone to the fact that a player has risen to the very top echelons of the Mortal Kombat 11 fighting, online fighting scene in the ranked match by spamming these DDoS attacks at other players. So, obviously it's dreadful, it's awful, but look, it's also delightfully exciting as well, isn't it? I was shocked when I read this.
When people are like, you're a hacker, you're using a lag switch. Now it's going to be, you're using DDoS.
Tell you what, that's probably the only way I could have got that trophy in, was it 10 or 9 where you had to win 10 ranked matches in a row?
It's 10, yeah. And one of my old co-hosts was fantastic at that game, and he would get 9 in a row and then get just trounced, and it was just like he gave up on it.
Yeah, but I mean, jokes aside, that's obviously a serious issue. So that they're looking into that or whatever. But I must admit, I thought it was a joke when I first read it, but it's actually it is a true story. So look, and the guy's probably just doing it to shoot angles anyway, just to show that it can be done. So because I think he's done it on multiple different usernames as well. He keeps changing as they discover him. So good luck to him for working the system out. however you can, I suppose. So, look, that's a very news in brief, listeners, so that we can clear the decks, we can make way for a topic that I think will interest all three of us a lot. And we're ganging up a little bit here, listeners, on Mindy, because Darrell, as he said, as a musical background as well, a massive fan of music in general, and I'm fascinated to hear his opinions here. I have some musical knowledge myself, and Mindy, well, Mindy is Mindy. she loves music, I'm sure, as well. We're about to find it.
Nice save. That was a really nice save.
Look, I'm totally in control sometimes. So the topic, listeners, I thought we would do is our favorite music. Sort of, it doesn't have to be the whole soundtrack. It could be a particular song, or it can be the soundtrack for the game, and just sort of music in games in general. To sort of start us off, so I'm not sure, we'll probably just have like an open discussion if there's certain games that you liked or whatever else. But, well, in fact, why don't we start there? Darrell, is there a particular soundtrack for a game, or a particular game, that really, you come back to for its music, or you felt set the level for you?
Oh, absolutely. Favorite game of all time, Resident Evil 2 on the original version. And the Resident Evil series has always been they've always been had these iconic safe room musical scores.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not familiar with Resident Evil, it's survival horror games, so they're very tense experiences, and so you're going to get a lot of orchestra style music that's going to kind of heighten the anticipation of the the conflict you're going to have. And what they also are very strong with is silence. So where you would, in like a movie or something, you're like, oh no, here comes the anticipation. There's going to be a jump scare. And then boom, here comes the thing that comes and gets you. And it's like, oh my gosh, you built me up and then you scared me. Well, they also kill noise. So in a Resident Evil game, it gets very tense because you don't hear anything. And the way they marry the tension in the game with this feeling of like, okay, I can breathe, is they play these beautiful pieces of music, whether it be piano, whether it be like almost like cigar box, like kind of stuff. And they play these musical pieces in these safe rooms where the enemies can't reach you. There's this one place where I can just regroup, I can save my game, I can check my inventory, heal my wounds and stuff like that. And Resident Evil 2, part of it was nostalgia and time and place and just being such a iconic game at such a young age for me. But the music score in the save room in Resident Evil 2 is just, it's burned into my soul. And it's a beautiful piece of piano. And actually what I did was I have a song I've written where I sampled that piano in throughout the song and throughout some of the choruses. And I reached out to a buddy of mine who's in Georgia, and he's a rap artist. His name's Georgia Red. And we collaborated a lot of music. And so I had him do we did a rap rock track, and I sampled this piece in. And at the very end of it, I'm saying, like the hard, just those heavy, just nasty riffs, and these crazy octaves that I was using, these octave effects that I was using on these picking pieces. And I sampled that in with it. It was just it spoke to me. Whether no one else in the world enjoys it, I loved it. And then at the very end of it, I sampled the piano in, and then I sampled it in reverse.
Nice.
And it's so eerie and yet so beautiful. And that game soundtrack in general just resonates so hard with me. And over the years, I listen to it on a regular basis. I revisit that game every year. And there's just something it's like something so soothing about it. And I just remember, like I said, being a young gamer, first foray into horror games, and just play it in just its chaos. And there's these zombies coming at you, and the controls are kind of stout and hard to maneuver. So you're intentionally hindered on what you can and can't do to escape. And then the game is just, again, like I said earlier, when I was joking about Metroidvanias, you have to go to point A to get a thing, to go back to point B to open a door, to get a thing, to go to point A and open this other thing, and then get this power, this gun you've unlocked to go back and forth. And they're just, the tension is so strong in these games. And then this beautiful music plays to let you know, hey man, you're safe for just a moment. and then you got to go out there and brave the storm again. So when you sent me this message, I was just like, oh, easy. This is by far this. I want the song played live at my funeral, like just this beautiful piece of piano. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, I can. I thought you might feel this way about this topic. So, look, it doesn't surprise me that we've already hit the horror genre here, for music. So, Mindy, do you want to? I mean, do you want to throw out a game or some music?
I have a lot of these.
Yeah, please.
A lot of them are just going to be like SNES era. I like kind of chip tunes and those kind of MIDI sounds from that era. So I gotta go. I know we've talked about Mega Man already, but like Mega Man X, honestly, I think had one of the best Mega Man soundtracks of that era. The problem is there's a lot of games where I can be like, oh, this is one like really good song, one really awesome song, but that I wouldn't take the whole soundtrack and be like, yes. There's some definitely good stuff in there, but I wouldn't take the whole thing and just go, yes, give me all of this. But like I would definitely throw a bunch of the Final Fantasies on there. Like Nobuo Uematsu was fantastic at composing in that era. I'm also gonna throw on like Donkey Kong Country had some really good like Donkey Kong Country 2, I think. Is that the one with the sticker brush?
Oh yeah.
Symphony? That one was fantastic. That specific song. Let's throw on, what else do I want to throw on here? I don't know if I can count Katamari Damacy because that's not really a soundtrack. It's just a collection of songs, like pop songs that were probably written for the game because they're all kind of ridiculous. But I assumed we were going more orchestral for this discussion, and not.
It's up to you.
When we circle back around, I'm gonna throw a couple wrenches at you.
So I'm, following that Chrono Trigger, of course. And then I want to bring up, and I'm sure there's other stuff I haven't thought about that I will think of. Oh, I gotta go NES DuckTales. Awesome game. Awesome soundtrack.
Oh, I was thinking that just a few minutes ago. I was like, oh yeah, DuckTales.
Yeah, DuckTales, man. And then I gotta throw on mostly for what they did with it, and I'm probably not the best person to talk about this because I'm not huge on I don't know a whole lot about the mechanics behind, I guess, music composition, but you guys might find this interesting. Monkey Island 2, they had a music engine, I suppose, called iMuse, M-U-S-E. And what it did was it dynamically layered the MIDI soundtrack in the game, depending on what you did in the game. So it wasn't just like a 2-minute song that looped. So once you hit the end of 2 minutes, it would just start over. It would dynamically kind of expand part of it if it needed to, or it would cut out part of it if it needed to. And it's something that it's so seamless you don't notice it. You know what I mean? They say, you've done set directions and stuff, you've done an amazing job when they don't notice it.
Yeah.
It's like that. I think you guys would find it interesting and you should look into it.
Yeah, I own the game. I've just never played it.
Oh, not just the game. I'm talking specifically about the iMuse system.
Gotcha.
And I know if you just put it in on YouTube, there are kind of demonstrations on how this thing works.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Give me a bit to think of some more because I know I have some.
Okay, well, look, what we might do is let's circle back for a second to horror, because I'm not sure if there's anything more, different games or different soundtracks you want to bring up there as well, and then we can maybe move to more open genres or whatever. But the reason I want to touch on horror a little bit is that I think it's one of the few genres where you can talk about soundtrack, because, by and large, horror music is atmospheric music or whatever else. So, we're not necessarily talking about individual tracks you would actually know the names of. They in effect just, work as an overall piece. And I thought what I'd throw out listeners here, not to give you too much edumacation, because I know nobody likes that, but generally what happened in the 20th century is music splintered hugely or whatever else, and we lost tonality, and in effect it allowed for a lot of experimentation, and that's where the horror genre really, I think, leans into heavily. And we have a lot to thank this Xenakis. He was a Greek composer, whatever else, in sort of the 1920s, and died unfortunately like 2001. If you've never heard of him, I'd suggest you look out for him. He didn't write for games, but he wrote a lot of percussion music, a lot of detuned string music, a lot of sort of, back of the bow type string techniques, a lot of what you'd hear today in horror films or horror games as a standard, in that thing. So a lot of it derived from him. And I thought I'd throw out, because we talked about Resident Evil 7, I thought I'd throw out, I don't know if anyone else has played it yet. Darrell, have you played that one? No.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you have. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So obviously they appropriated the "Go Tell Aunt Rhody" song here, and I'm sure you listeners, you've either heard it or you can jump on YouTube. Unfortunately, we can't play it in the podcast because of copyright issues. So they appropriated this song, and I thought it was a really clever maneuver. I mean, it's quite creepy, isn't it, Darrell, to take a song like that?
It's creepy and beautiful.
Yes.
It is so well done. So well done.
It really is. And look, listeners, one of the interesting things about that song, set in a minor key, it's very dark, full of dissonant chords and dissonance. But as the song goes on, it actually shifts to the major right at the end. And so if you listen to it, you'll hear that it almost like it transcends. That's an intentional effect, yeah? So it's making you sort of feel like it's a little bit elevated or whatever. And then it finishes on a dissonant chord at the end just to bring back that darkness. So that's to sort of give you an idea there. But the other one I thought I'd throw out as well is the Tomb Raider. Now, the original, this was on the, I don't know, I just call it Tomb Raider, but it was the PS3 one that was also ported to the PS4. Did anyone play that?
Oh yeah, I actually beat it on 360, beat it on PS3, and started on PS4, and just finally said, okay, enough's enough.
Yeah. Well, this is when I sort of started to get into music in games and started to pay more attention, because the composer here, Jason Greaves, he actually created an instrument. He made an instrument with a I think he was a sculptor, and to make the score on. Now, listeners, if you don't know about this, there are actually some videos on YouTube where they discuss this with the instrument creator and Jason, and he actually talks about going into trying to create a whole new sound world, and you can see this instrument, and it looks like nothing you would have ever seen. It's sort of a compilation of wires and trash cans and just everything you would find in the shed basically shoved together or whatever, and it's played with a bow, or it's hit, or it's kicked, or it's so outside of traditional musical performance, if you like, into almost performance art, and it creates some unbelievable sounds. And he based the first 15 minutes of the game soundtrack, but by and large the whole soundtrack, on this one instrument. Yeah. So I don't. You probably can't recall that, Darrell, because it's probably been such a long time ago. But again, it pulls at that sort of almost like a saw, like a physical saw. If you play that with a bow, this sort of like a shimmering, you get what I'm coming at there, a shimmering sort of sound. And it just sounds, to me as a musician, sounds that I've never heard before. And that's what excites me about this sort of this horror genre. Please, if anyone else has got anything to throw in this genre, stop me or whatever else and do.
Well, I want to take it a different direction when you're talking about horror, and 2016's Doom.
Oh, yes.
Mick Gordon wrote the soundtrack for that game, and it is, you're running through hell killing demons. What do you want to hear while you're doing that? And he just wrote some of the most amazing drop tune. It sounds like an 8-string guitar, just riffs, and it's just intense. And it really marries the actual like intensity of the game and the speed of the game with just this insane like guitar structure. And he adds like this industrial feel to it, and from the way it's produced. So it's almost like, you got this really chuggy, djent almost guitar going on. And yet then he's married it with this industrial, almost, it's like hints of like Nine Inch Nails stabbing westward style, like industrial theme. And so it's almost like, here's this space marine in hell killing stuff. And then it's like my heart's racing, not because I'm running a mile a minute, blowing heads and guts out, but it's also, there's this beat in this guitar, just driving me to almost like, it's almost a rhythm game, because essentially you're going through and you're ripping and tearing, no pun intended, because that's the name of one of the main songs. But you're ripping and tearing these body parts, and these you're grabbing and latching onto these people, and you're pulling your shotgun out, and it's like, it's almost like you start to marry your attacks with the progression of the song. and it's just wild, and it's just one of those things where, like, as a former musician of a metal, I played in a metal band, so I'm like partial to that, but I know that's just like such a subgenre of an already not so popular genre. When you're starting to play metal and heavier, deep tuned metal at that, you're just like, yeah, it's just not a mainstream thing. So whenever this hit that game, I was just like, you built this for me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's just so intense.
Yeah. It just shows you the power that music can have, can't it? It sort of transcends the game.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And and whenever he did the performance at the Game Awards, that was just so cool to me, because he just ran around the stage and played some riffs, and he had this one drummer in the back, and it was just this thing. It was super, super cool, man. I loved it.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the other things I find interesting about, and it crosses across all games, and I know Mindy has one that's coming up in a second we'll talk about, but also this, and you've just alluded to it there, the layering and texture that's used, so that there can be, and by what I mean here, listeners, is literally just the number of sounds you're hearing at once, or whatever. So in a Doom soundtrack, as you say, it's just such a thickness of the music too, isn't it? It's a physical presence almost that hits you, and to give you an example here, listeners, if you're not sort of musically attuned or whatever, and you're like, what is he driving at here? Then I'd recommend jumping on YouTube and have a listen to the Layers of Fear 2 soundtrack. In particular, the Holy Flame song. So this is by a composer, Arkadiusz Rakowski, a Polish composer from a Polish game, I believe, as well. And this particular, the whole soundtrack is fantastic. It's based on sort of old, Hollywood films. The game is also fantastic as a side point, but what this song does is it starts off in what we would call in music a minimalist style. So it's a very thin, homophonic, one-line texture with the piano, and then they add the voices, and then they add the strings. And basically it's repeating the same idea, but it's layering it on top, if you like. So they're just continuing to add layers and layers and layers. So this is something like the Pirates of the Caribbean, if you like. When you listen to that, the song there, the main theme song, it's only played by one or two violinists. Initially it was only played, but it was just layered hundreds of times over and over itself, so that it got this thickness. And they do a similar thing here, and to some degree, games like the Tomb Raider in particular, they do this a lot. Doom does this as well, where you're not just having the core 4 or 5 people playing, you're actually putting the sound, just continually recording it and recording it and recording it over itself to get this density, which is sort of what you're alluding to. And I think that sort of stuff is fantastic, because you almost start to hear like sub rhythms in the music if you really listen, and sub melody and stuff. So it is great. But let's move across, Mindy. So Mindy, you've got a horror game for us, do you, as well?
I do. So you talked about kind of horror in the opposite direction with Doom. It reminded me of Silent Hill 2.
Oh yes, I had that on my list.
Which is interesting because the soundtrack is great, but then you look at the composer, you look at Akira Yamaoka, and all of his like musical inspirations are like Trent Reznor.
Yes.
And like all of these names you would not associate with kind of this quiet atmospheric horror. And then you really think about what the Silent Hill soundtrack is, and there's a lot of strong beats in it.
Yes.
So it's really interesting to think that, even though there's some definite rock beats in there, it's still a creepy soundtrack.
The main title for the Silent Hill movie, don't know if you remember that, it has this weird like classic guitar sound, and they borrowed it from the Silent Hill franchise. I just can't remember which game had it, but it's like
all of the music from the Silent Hill movie was from the games, I believe.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Like, it's so creepy and crazy, and it's just like, it's almost got this, the Italian pizzeria kind of sound to it.
Yeah, that was the beginning of Laura's theme, I think, from Silent Hill 2.
Man, that's one of my favorites too. I had that one written down in my little notes over here. I was like, man, that one just it almost makes my skin crawl, but like in a good way. It's like, it's really neat.
It was really cool. I actually got to see. So there was this video game symphony back in 2005, something like that, 2005 or 6, called Play, and this is in Chicago, and it was just a big symphony hall with the local Chicago Symphony, And I don't know if it was a tour, if it was like a 2-night only event in Chicago, but I got tickets to it with some friends of mine. And we drove to Chicago, and like Nobuo Uematsu was there, and Akira Yamaoka, and he got on stage and he played Theme of Laura, which was really, really cool to see. Koji Kano was there, and he got on the piano and played some Mario music. That was really, really cool.
That would have been fantastic.
Has nothing to do with soundtracks. I just thought it was really cool.
Yeah. Well, look, we're moving towards the Japanese composers. You've already brought them up, Mindy. The true masters of so many scores that we all know, particularly Final Fantasy. I don't know, is this starting to get out of your wheelhouse though a little bit, Darrell? Are you are you familiar with any of these names?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I've actually got a Spotify playlist with hundreds and hundreds of these pieces that we're talking about right now. And like, but back before Spotify, I would just get on the internet and search these composers and try to pull whatever music I could from them. And I'll get on YouTube and I'm a huge fan. I might not say their names correctly just because I'm a dummy from the South, but so I try not to say them. But yeah, I'm very familiar with all this stuff.
Yeah. So we've talked about the original Final Fantasy. What about though? Have you played I know Mindy hasn't played. You probably haven't either. Final Fantasy 15 yet. But so there was a shift in composer here to Yoko Shimomura, the fantastic female Japanese composer here. I'm not sure, Mindy, if you're familiar with any of her work. Possibly not.
Shimomura?
Yes. Yeah.
Yoko Shimomura. Yeah, she worked for Square. She did the music for like Kingdom Hearts.
That's right, yeah. So you are familiar. A fantastic composer, and particularly well known for just hitting, like writing like one or two songs that are just, irreverent. They will just, a game can be defined by, in her things. And so listeners, I'm sort of thinking here of Final Fantasy 15 in particular, and the Leviathan theme, the Apocalypsis Aquarius that she wrote. Now, this is another one I would recommend listening to. So this, again, it's in the orchestral vein, another like hugely dense work or whatever else that, starts with piano strings, and then we even get, Latin voice coming in and everything else. And it for me, that song is that game. It's empowering. I mean, the scene is empowering itself, but that music is empowering. So with that in mind, Darrell, you already said the Resident 2 Safe Room, but Mindy, is there like a song, that's like that for you in a game that you define the whole game by almost?
Ooh, I mean, again, shout out to Theme of Laura from Silent Hill 2. Just fantastic song.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
I wish I'd known that you were going to ask, because I would have sat down and really, really thought about this.
Well, it's on or Darrell, I mean, if you have others as well, please throw them out.
Yeah. So I figured, with as much as Mindy talks about like Mega Man and those games, I figured she would be leaning heavier into the old school.
Definitely.
And with me being such a horror fan, I tried to kind of stick to things that are in that wheelhouse. So I got another one for you.
Please.
Okay, so I am a huge rap rock fan. Like if you take the best of those two worlds and mash them together, like it's just it's my thing. I don't know why. I'm just an old late 90s, early 2000s rap rock guy. And there was a spin-off Resident Evil game that came on the PlayStation 2 called Resident Evil Dead Aim. And it was not a great game. The dialogue was kind of cheesy. It was a third-person game until you got into a battle almost. And then it would drop into a first-person, almost like rail shooter. And it was very experimental. And I remember really digging the game because it was different. It was like, oh, here's this Resident Evil side story taking place on this this carrier ship in the ocean. And the game was fine, but what stood out to me the most was at the very end of the game. When you beat the game and you're rolling credits, there's this song by a band called Rise, RYZE.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not mistaken, they were like a Portuguese rap rock band, and the song's called Gunshot. And I don't know if you ever heard of the band, oh my gosh, Trust Company. They were popular in the early 2000s, but they were a alternative metal band. And they had this really distinctive guitar riff that their one main single was based off of. And anyways, this band Rise had a very similar riff, and it was just like a and it was just like gunshot, and it was And then in the verses, it was just like this little a little bass guitar riff, and then just like a real simple picky beat with the guitar, and then the dude would just sit there and rap, and it was just, I was mind blown. I was like, wait a second, you just took my favorite game franchise and then also incorporated my favorite style of music. And I was like, and it worked. It was just this weird piece that it was almost like the game's theme song. You know how like movies used to have like soundtracks years ago, and they were like kind of almost like Mission Impossible. Limp Bizkit wrote a song for them, and it was just like movies seem to be very defined by their soundtrack, years ago. And that was what this game was. When you rolled credits, it played this wildly upbeat song about shooting a gun. It was, that game had kind of leaned into the on-rail shooter light gun kind of mechanics, and it was just it was very neat. It sticks out to me. It defines that game for me because it was it spoke to my interest, but it was also oddly out of place, and yet it still worked, for what that game was. And that game was at the very end of it was a wild. And I don't know. It's just one of those games that like it's almost like when I get on a show and I talk about it or I mention to anybody, it's like no one's ever heard this. But if you go on YouTube, it's there. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, it just never made a splash. The game wasn't all that big, but man, it's I'll never forget it. It defines that game for sure.
It resonated, yeah. And Mindy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, couple more I want to throw on here because we've opened a can here for me. I'm gonna give it up to my girl Michiru Yamane, who wrote a lot of Castlevania music, starting with like Symphony of the Night, which I think is an excellent soundtrack. Excellent soundtrack. I think she wrote the music for Bloodstained too.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that's really good. That soundtrack in that game.
So she kind of writes music for it's been mostly Castlevania. I think she wrote for some Suikoden too, but I didn't play Suikoden. But those are some great, and you talked earlier about just kind of a song that kind of defines the whole soundtrack. This one's kind of cheating because it's more like, how like the Final Fantasy games, every one of them has a variation of the Chocobo theme.
Yes.
Almost every Castlevania game has a variation of the vampire killer music, the that one.
Yes, yeah.
I think almost every Castlevania game has some reworking or variation of that song in it, but it's always great. When you find it, it's always great. And then I'm gonna throw out something obscure. I'm gonna throw out Shadow Hearts here. Shadow Hearts, and I'm gonna throw out the whole series here. So Kadelka on the PS1, and then Shadow Hearts, the trilogy on PS2. These were role-playing games, Japanese role-playing games from Saknoff that I think is shut down. I don't think anyone's bought them out, which means they're never ever going to get ported. And that makes me super sad because I very much would love to play these in a remaster or just
email THQ Nordic. They'll take care of it.
Or just port it and throw some trophies on it. I love these games. They're definitely not for everyone, but I love them. The soundtrack is especially for the first Shower game is fantastic. It's this really interesting blend of like kind of gothic horror music with some I guess almost I'm so bad with words today. Stereotypical kind of ancient Chinese or Japanese music. When you kind of think about stereotypes, those kind of instruments would come in. It's very eclectic, and you'd think they would not work, but it really all kind of comes together and works. I really don't know how to explain it. Just Google it. I'm sure the soundtrack's up on YouTube. Really like that a lot. And then if we're going to move away from horror, I have a couple more things. But if we're going to stick on horror, then I will be quiet.
Let's move away, but before we move away, let's move. I'm going to segue here into the use of covers because that's in music. That's a major thing. Obviously, it's a big thing in AAA games, more for the budget, I suppose. And I thought you opened the door to that because with Final Fantasy, I mean, they're not direct covers, but as you say, they're arrangements of the same songs done in new ways or whatever else. And with that sort of in mind, only because a lot of people will never get there just because of the time commitment involved in Final Fantasy 14. But interestingly, they obviously do the same thing. In a game that long, to craft music that is both interesting and doesn't overstay its welcome, but also not intrusive is a massive achievement. But they actually switch composers to Masayoshi Soken, I believe, for the expansion, which is an unusual move. And so it takes a lot of the music that was in the base game, and he's added an electric element, if you like. It wasn't acoustic before, but he's looked at more electric guitar, almost like a rocky sort of element, which is different. It's almost jarring, but also refreshing in that game. So why don't we, extending from that, why don't we look at covers? Are there any sort of songs? I mean, I didn't pre-warn you on this, so I don't know. I'm really throwing it out to you now. But the different covers of songs that you've heard in games that attracted you, or
the first thing I think of is BioShock Infinite.
Mm-hmm.
When they took those licensed lyricked songs and switched up the audio to put them in a different point in musical history. For there are plot reasons for it, but it was really cool to hear. Like I like Postmodern Jukebox quite a bit.
Yes.
So that was really fun to hear in BioShock Infinite. That kind of idea of taking a more modern song and throwing it back into a different genre of music.
Yeah. Darrell, do you have any? Or
Well, it was the man that shot the world in Metal Gear Solid 5.
Oh, good one.
Very good.
That was a great one.
You've been sitting on that.
Yeah, I get a little excited when you start talking about this kind of stuff because, I don't know, man. Like, as someone who, and CJ, what I'm saying, and this isn't limited to, but you understand where I'm coming from. When you get if you get passionate about music, music moves people in general. It wouldn't be in and out and everywhere if it didn't. But man, when you're like especially passionate about music to where you start hearing something that you're familiar with, and then you hear someone do a take on it, and then you take a mastermind creator like Hideo Kojima, and then you just boom, I'm gonna just put this right here in this game. Man, it gets exciting, and that was a game. That was a wild game, and that fit perfectly for what he was doing. I'm very, very interested to see what he does with Death Stranding, because I know there's going to be some wild music pieces in there. And you were saying earlier about Resident Evil 7, that Go Tell and Rhodey is a cover.
That's right.
And it is that one right there, a very moving piece, and I like what they did with it.
I have one that's it's not a cover, but in terms of just sticking a song, like a perfectly placed song in a game, I got to give it to Red Dead Redemption, the first one.
Oh, this one.
Where it's that song so far away.
When you cross the border.
And it's just,
yeah.
It's just there's nothing going on. You're just riding, and the sun is slowly setting, and you're just riding down into Mexico.
Yes, just drops in.
It was a really, really awesome moment.
I got one I want to add to that before you change direction real quick, because you mentioned the sunset. I've been sitting on this one too, because I assume we would go to licensed music in games as well. But Deftones wrote a song called Diamond Eyes. And Deftones is a very wild, weird band. And I remember getting in Saints Row 3, Diamond Eyes is one of the licensed pieces of music in there. And I remember getting on a motorcycle and just circling the map, just getting on there and just driving and just listening to Deftones just over and over and over again, because you could unlock the songs that you wanted and create your own playlist in the game. So I just remember going through and just playing that, and then the sun setting as I'm driving this little motorcycle through these hills and stuff, and just playing that. And when you mentioned the Red Dead, with the sun setting and that music playing, it just being perfect, I just remember being at this weird piece, listening to this song, driving a motorcycle as fast as I could through Saints Row, not playing the game, essentially just cruising as you would in everyday life.
I'd like to just sidebar for a second, if I can, Darrell, and ask you just a specific question.
Sure.
So having listened to your podcast a couple of weeks ago, and you're sort of talking more about your musical history, and one of the things you said, which I found quite interesting, and again, I think a lot of musicians, whether they be professional or hobbyists that spend a lot of time doing it, have possibly come across this before. Is that you said you found it at one point you were spending so much time, around music, creating music, writing music, performing music, that it almost became overwhelming, that it was consuming for you. And that you almost needed to get away from it to stop, because it was so time intensive.
Oh yeah.
Do you? Yeah, and I just want to sort of catenate onto that, is that I've obviously studied music, and it's been throughout my whole life, but I was taught at a very early age that did, because I came from a classical background. So if you ever want to study a narcissistic pursuit, then study classical music, my friends. You will never achieve perfection. But one thing I was taught from very early on, from playing and writing, is that the perfect music is silence. That is absolute perfection. So anything you create needs to improve on, you can't improve on perfection, but you need to do something that will improve the silence. And, you tell people that and they're like, that's just ridiculous. Silence is nothing, it's boring, but for musicians, silence is like everything. I think when you're encompassed in music so much. So with that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you ever find that music becomes distracting in games because you're just getting too distracted by it, or too overwhelmed or consumed in that, and losing track of what else is going on? Or is that a long shot?
Oh no, absolutely. Like I said earlier, music moves you, and that's like the everyday person, like again, calling back to the horror stuff, like stringed instruments and this orchestric like style of music that is built to slowly start and to intensify the tension, the atmosphere of what you're experiencing, playing on those senses, ultimately leading you to the next story beat or set piece. And that was, you talk about like with what I said about the music is like, yeah, I get fixated on that stuff in the games, and I get so like, sometimes I like to go find the trigger points and just kind of play on them, it's the thing about music in games is like, music is built to carry a cadence from this point A to point B, and you have to make it to point A to trigger that kind of stuff. And so there's certain times in games where I'm just like, I find something I like and I just go trigger it, again, like using every Resident Evil game has a different save room piece, and sometimes you just go in there. Resident Evil 7 has one of the most iconic save rooms ever, and it was just this weird chord that's just played across what sounds like a guitar, but it could even be a cigar box, like I mentioned that earlier. It's just this weird, really, this note that stands out, but yeah, it gets distracting. And like I said, and in my show is that I was getting so overwhelmed with like, I'm not like an anxious person. I don't get overwhelmed in life in general, but like I got to the point where I was playing and writing and creating and editing so much that I was making myself like sick, and it was almost like I had worked myself into like a deep depression. And it's one of those things where we sit back and we think about artists and composers and these big musicians throughout the world, whatever genre you pick, someone has battled mental illness, depression, and taken their life because of it. And you sit back and you wonder, and you're like, you're at the top of the mountain. You're like entertaining millions, or you're writing pieces of music for thousands and millions and whatever, whether you're behind the curtain or you're in front of it. And yet these people find themselves so consumed and so depressed, but yet throughout their emotions and their anguish and their joy and their happiness and all that stuff, they're able to use that to create a piece of music and move you, and like, and it don't like, I akin it to being like a puppet master for like a marionette, like, like you're pulling the strings and I'm moving along with it because of what you're doing. And it's one of those things where I was making myself sick because I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I wasn't happy with what I was creating, but yet I was spending, inside this program that I like to use, it kind of gives you like a rundown when you log in. So how many hours you spend in it. And in 1 year's time, I spent 1,000 hours in this program, writing, editing, creating, and not doing much sleeping. And it was one of those things where I was like, I needed to kind of like, I had gone too far and I wasn't getting any returns out of it. I wasn't happy with it. I was like, man, I need to distance myself. But then what brings me back is you know, that very same thing is when you hear a piece of music played and, you know, it's like, man, I feel something, you know, when I'm listening to this, and like whenever I hear this piece, you know, I love listening to people talk about chip tunes on the old school game stuff, because I remember that stuff. It takes you to a time and a place, you know. People love the Mega Man soundtrack, you know, like when Mindy mentioned Donkey Kong Country, Super Nintendo. My brother and I sunk so many hours between that and Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic 2, more specifically on Sega Genesis. And like when I hear those songs, you know, like it takes me back to like a time and a place. So yeah, it can get distracting, because sometimes like you get like, you remember that more so than you remember actually like what you were doing in the moment.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I often get asked, like, what do I listen to, or can I recommend stuff? And often I say, like, that I listen to nothing, which sounds insane, because, you know, I listen to hours of music every day. But in my own time, I often do listen to nothing. I think because it is, as you say, it's just so much that the brain needs time to take it in. And one of the things I find interesting talking to Mindy is, and she's been very good for me, because I'm starting to be more conscious of when I'm using other people's ideas, if I read them somewhere and whatever else, and potentially if they're influencing my own ideas. But from music, I mean, that is a standard practice, is that you expose yourself to so much, and then it's almost like, I mean, without saying that, you know, it's idiot savant syndrome or something, it's almost like something comes down and just arranges the notes from everywhere you've heard and somehow makes it work. And I think that maybe leads to your point for people that aren't, you know, in this field or music, the why it is so, you know, difficult, and maybe why some people, you know, lead to addiction and other things of this nature, is that the music requires an incredible honesty. In a lot of ways, if it's done right, you shouldn't be there. You should almost be, you know, it should just be flowing through you, and which is a lovely, you know, thing to say. And, you know, we talk and, you know, we use words, and that's easy. But music requires that honesty where you learn all the rules, you know which note's supposed to follow which note and why it should sound like this, and then you break them and you do something else. And that something else, it's not just random. It's got to come from somewhere, an understanding, a feeling. And unfortunately, that something else usually comes from life experience, and from the nastier side of life experience. I mean, you can't write about anguish if you've never been hurt, you know,
That's
obviously.
right.
That's the cliche. And so you're tapping into these things, you know, as I'm sure you know, Darrell, all the time. And so are these games composers, you know, they you know, it's a just like film composers or you know, classical music symphony writers or whatever, it's all from this same creative sort of vein of tapping in and exposure. So it's interesting. It's very interesting to talk about this, because I think, you know, a lot of people just take the music and go, oh, that's lovely, and there's not a lot of thought behind it, but there is so much that goes into it.
So I've got this running playlist on Spotify that's about 500 songs right now, and it's I use it when I'm reading comic books. And so one thing I've found that helps me focus is when I'm reading is to listen to like music score. And I enjoy reading, but like if I am reading in silence, my brain is going a mile a minute, and I'm reading words, but like what's going on in my head is just completely different. It's just completely nonsensical. So what I found that helped me a lot was I would put on some music score. And then and like I said, I read comic books a lot. So that's like one of my favorite things to do. With life being so hectic, I can pull a little book out, read a few panels, and it just works for me. So what I've been doing lately is I've been taking some of my favorite music score, whether it be from movies, games, and all that stuff, and I've been just randomly just shuffle it and just rock and roll. And as I'm going through from scene to scene, it's random, but yet my brain is associating my reading pace with the pace of the music score that I'm listening to. And it was one of the wildest things, because, you know, like you talk about, you listen to hours and hours of music a day, and especially when you're working on music, you do need silence. Or my alternative is when I get like so worked up that I'm all musiced out, then I just throw on a podcast and I listen to someone talk, and it's just a different pace, and it helps me kind of reset and recharge. And then when I'm tired of hearing people talking, then I go and I exercise my brain some more. But that's one of the things I've found as far as like with reading is like the scenes that I'm reading, and like if I'm reading a novel or I'm reading a comic or I'm reading, you know what I'm saying, whatever, when I have music score playing in the background, it elevates like almost like my senses. Like what I'm reading is more impactful. It's more intense, like, and it's mind blowing almost how like from song to song, like it almost marries what I'm reading. And I know that it's not really, it's just the way your brain is like reacting to the notes. And it's one of the things I keep telling a lot of guys I work with. I'm like, man, you guys got to try this. It's almost like a drug, like find some music score, anything that you're even remotely interested in, and start reading whatever you want to read, and then just like have that go in the background and just watch what it does.
That's right. Be open to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very cool.
Yeah. And Mindy, we've gone off on another lovely long tangent there. I do apologize, listeners, but it gives you perhaps an insight into where we're coming from. Some extra last minute addition games.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to perfectly placed licensed songs. And I realized I forgot about Alan Wake.
Oh, yeah.
So Alan Wake, episodic horror game. And they always had an interesting song at the end of each episode. But the very end of the game, during the credits, they dropped in Space Oddity by David Bowie. And there was just something really, really, really haunting about that. Really, really good idea. Well done, them.
We didn't really touch on the licensing one. So, I mean, Darrell, did you have any that you wanted to throw out as well? Or
well, I mentioned the Deftones for Saints Row 3 earlier. Yes. And then, here's one that everyone can latch on to is a little Tony Hawk 2, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a very iconic soundtrack. That was like, throwing back on some old alternative and punk rock. That was one that I actually got Tony Hawk 2 on the Dreamcast. I was one of the fortunate one out of 999,000 people who actually got a Dreamcast when they came out. And I played Tony Hawk 2 just like a madman, me and one of my old bandmates. That's what we did. We set up, my dad owned a video store back when that was a viable business model that you could have. And we would set up at the front counter of the video store on our 32-inch tube TV with my Dreamcast. And we would just sit there and just rock out and just do kick flips.
I personally didn't touch too much on the licensing myself, partly because I wanted to show today that unlike, with film composition, we see the same names coming up all the time, but with music, it is much more open, and it just shows you the diversity of people working in this field as well, which I think is very exciting. I think games are the future of music, or the future of commercial music anyway at this point in time, just because of the money involved, and also the amount of content that's been created. And with the rise of home studios, as you would agree, Darrell, I mean, you can do so much of this stuff yourself now that it's just such an exciting medium, for artists of any description to move into, And I think, I mean, I don't want to throw it out and then someone sent an article in that proves me wrong, but I do feel that we're seeing less and less big licensed music in games now, comparatively compared to the amount of music that is in games. And, for me personally, I find that exciting, but that could just be myself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to say, that'll give me a chance to segue into Devil Trigger for Devil May Cry 5. That's a very recent song that I heard it, and it hit all the right notes. It did all the right things. And I sat there and just rocked it out so much when that first came out. And now my children, they're like, Dad, can we listen to Devil Trigger? I'm like, yes, we can. And what's that?
You're raising them well.
I try really hard. But it's tough between Call Me Maybe and then some Skrillex and then some Devil Trigger. And then we got to sprinkle in our Minecraft parodies of pop songs. We got to keep it real over here. But
it had to come in somewhere.
But yeah, I forget who writes it. I'm looking up now. That Devil Trigger song, but that's another one to where that's a couple artists, Casey Edwards. That was just really well done, and I love the industrial feel to that song. There's a really cool guitar riff in the back, and then you have this woman singing who has a fantastic voice, and it has Devil May Cry has always had, like high octane rock style music kind of playing in the background. So as you're doing your super sexy swinging style combos, they've got something a little intense in the background to kind of keep you going. But man, they really amped it up. They really turned it up to 11 on Devil May Cry 5, and their soundtrack's pretty rad. And I really enjoy, what I'm saying, like some of these songs that you're hearing coming from games. Like it's. I feel like we're in a really, really good era of that stuff. And I feel like this generation especially, I feel like it's just been constant. I feel like I pulled, several songs out just that are in line with my taste, that are just like, they're heavy hitters in my opinion. I really enjoyed them. And that's just in the past few years. And, I feel like, moving forward, we're going to get a whole lot more stuff and even better stuff. So I'm super excited about, where it's all going. And it can be from anybody, like you said, anybody with a home studio can do it.
That's right. I think that's the biggest thing. I think music sort of from obviously the popular music genre exploded, but the sort of performancey, arty type music, if you like, from the sort of 80s onward has been very stale. Not talking popular music here, but coming. I think you're right. I think we're coming into a new generation for music. I mean, just its sound source, instruments, electronic influence is expanding and everything. It is very, very exciting. But look, Mindy, I see you have a couple more as well, please.
I do before we put this to rest. Two overall soundtracks that I neglected to mention. First one, Journey.
Oh yes,
Austin Wintory did a really awesome job. Fun little trivia fact: it is the first video game soundtrack to ever receive a Grammy nomination.
That's right, yeah. And what's cool. Interesting, I don't know if you know this, Mindy, you probably do, but it went up against visual media, so not game soundtrack, but actual movies as well. So, yeah.
Like, he went up against, like, Hans Zimmer and Howard, like, the big ones.
That's Pirates, that's right, yes. Yeah.
I love Hans Zimmer.
He also, and then he went on, Journey was kind of his breakout, so then he did, he scored the remake of Leisure Suit Larry and the Land of the Lounge Lizards, which I think is really interesting. But he went on and did CJ stuff that you would know. He did Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Luna, that game that you talked about a couple weeks ago with the little bird.
I didn't realize he did that. Okay.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
And then possibly one of my favorite soundtracks ever, game soundtracks ever, was Heavy Rain.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Had an amazing soundtrack, and it's really cool what they did with the guy Norman Corbale, I believe. Unfortunately, he has passed. He did do all of the Quantic Dream games, and then he died. I think midway through Beyond Two Souls. I know he wrote some of it, but not all of it. So that's sad. But what I really,
Mindy, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Did you play Detroit Become Human yet?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so do you remember in the beginning of that game, in the opening, like the town square where you're Marcus and you have to go pick up the paints for that guy? I can't remember his name now. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember? Did you stop and look at the guy playing the acoustic guitar and singing music with a soul in the opening area?
I probably did on my first playthrough, but not like back when my friend had the game and I didn't. But I don't think I did when I did my trophy playthrough.
Well, regardless for you, CJ, if you guys haven't, if you're listening to the show, I highly, highly, highly recommend go on YouTube and just Google that scene, guitar song in Detroit Become Human. The song in the game is called I think Motown Rain. But essentially, you just walk up, and to set the stage is, they're trying to show you that in Detroit in this time that people are like, there's a difference between humans and robots. Robots don't have souls, and so this guy's just standing there, kind of playing a little music, got his guitar case open. He's got a little folded up card that says like $1 for music with a soul or something like that, and he sings this beautiful song over the acoustic guitar. And I walked up to it, I saw it, I clicked on it. I'm like, man, there might be a trophy associated with this if I listen to the whole song. Within 10 seconds, I was so hooked. And I went on the internet, and someone finally ripped that section out and put it on YouTube. And I reached out. I was trying to find who wrote the song, and it's a guy named Steve Wallace. He's on Spotify now. The song he re-recorded it, and it's actually called Melbourne Rain on Spotify. So he changed it up just a little bit so he could re-release it, but it is beautiful, and it's just it's almost got a little bit of a bluesy. It has like a, I don't want to say country feel to it, but it's got this old school southern feel to the song. It's beautiful. But yeah, like that's one that you mentioned Heavy Rain, and I had forgot to mention Steve Wallace, Melbourne Rain. That song is beautiful, and that scene in the game is so early on, but it's missable. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't know. But if you watch it, and it really sets the tone moving forward for the division between humans and androids, that I don't necessarily feel like any other scene in the game does that for me. I think this one, married with the beautiful song, really set the divide between the two, that there's people that are hurt by the fact that these androids are here, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm definitely going to look that up now. Yeah. So, look, listeners, as you can sort of see, we could go on for hours on this topic, I think, or whatever else. But it's talking about something that you're passionate about. Obviously, it's exciting. But what I'm going to try and do, or Mindy and I are going to try and do, it's going to be a mammoth effort. Is I'll try and notate in the notes this week most of the songs or games that we've referenced in this section, so that you can go back, in your own time and have a listen to some of this stuff if it does interest you. But what I was thinking there as you were talking, Darrell, is, we've got, Mindy is encouraging me to do a deep dive, which we will be doing, listeners, very shortly in a couple of weeks, I believe, on the Last Door game. But I think we'll have to do the same for a game with... We are, yeah. We picked that a few weeks ago. Yes, we'll discuss that later. You've already played it. I've got to play it. but what I was sidetracked there, listener. Sorry. We'll have to do the same for music in a game. And I don't know if this game. I'm going to throw it out there, but we'll talk about this later. But possibly the Life is Strange 2 could be a good candidate, because I have a feeling Mindy will play that, and perhaps you will, Darrell, as well, because the music in that.
Ooh, Life is Strange 1 had a really good soundtrack too. Sorry.
2 is even better, I think, and it's got a bit of everything: license, some original composition, some arranging as well. So, look, listeners, that might be something for us all to come back and touch base on in the coming months. That would be fantastic. But look, let's move on. Let's close the door. Otherwise, we won't be able to get away from that topic, even though it was fascinating. We're going to dump the spam this week, because there's almost nothing looking down the list or whatever else. And instead, we won't leave you hanging. Instead, what we'll do is we'll just, for the last couple of moments, we'll just address the question that came in on the Push to Platinum PS4 Club, and it came in from PVT_Kane, and he's asked here. Let me just have a look. Here it is. He's asked here for some recommendations on a first platinum milestone game. So he's obviously just started playing PlayStation or whatever else. He's got some Assassin's Creed on his list already, but he hasn't got a plat yet. What could we recommend? Could we throw out a game that I know it's very general, but a good first plat, maybe something to get his teeth stuck into? What do you reckon, Darrell?
I would recommend Spider-Man on PS4. It's a fantastic game. It plays well. It's beautiful. But the platinum is very straightforward. So you're not going to do a ton of grinding. You're not going to have to do any farming. If you just play the game. And a little trophy tip: in between the main missions, do the crimes, in the town as they pop up. It's a very straightforward platinum, and it's a very high percentage platinum too. Like, a lot of people got this platinum, so it's not hard, and it's fun. And so I would highly recommend, if you're looking for one that's it's not trophy trash, so you're not going to throw your first one away on a My Name is Mayo, but you're not a masochist, so you're not going to go for like a Bloodborne, Dark Souls, Sekiro kind of thing. Something right in the middle, that it's a fun game and it has a good solid trophy list, is Spider-Man PS4.
Perfect. And Mindy?
I say make it something you love. My first platinum was Heavy Rain, and that was because that was the first game that I won't say it got me into trophy hunting, because I still, I wasn't completing absolutely everything by that point. But it was the first game where I was like, yeah, I want to get everything. I want to do everything I can in this game. And that equated to get all the trophies in this game.
It's a fantastic game, too.
Yeah, it's a great game. I liked it a lot. I acknowledge its faults, but I like it quite a bit. So I say make it something you really like. You know, like Darrell said. I mean, unless you're like super into Dark Souls, which is totally legit. But like, don't do it because you think it looks impressive. Just do it because you like it. Or, you know, if you're like me and you set up milestones to be a smartass, you know, do something with a funny platinum title.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Look, my advice, PVT Kane, would be if you're sitting on 0 platinums, is to run now, and run very fast away from trophies. You can still be saved. quick before they get me.
That is the best advice.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's good advice.
But you know, look, if it's too late for you, if you've already succumbed and you're one of us now, and I do apologize, you know, if we helped you on that path. Look, I would just echo their ideas. They're fantastic. Play something that you like. My first platinum was, ironically, Assassin's Creed Unity, which we dumped on a little bit earlier today. But look, I enjoyed it at the time. And, you know, one of the cool things about putting a series in at the start is that you sort of feel compelled to keep going. And, you know, years later, I'm still doing it with Assassin. So that could be something to think out. You know, if you're looking for JRPGs, I would obviously throw out Final Fantasy 15 or Ni no Kuni 2 is great. I believe there's a remaster coming soon. Spider-Man is also fantastic. Detroit, I thought, was really good too. So look, there's a ton of things there. But my advice to you, if you're not too hardcore a trophy hunter, is to start a few games and just play them and just see which one naturally becomes your first plat. You know, whichever one you finish. I'm sure you'll finish them all, but whichever one you finish first will be the first plat, and then you're off on your journey. But if you are taking Mindy's advice of a funny name, there is no funnier name than, do you know which one I'm going to reference, Mindy? Which plat name?
No.
You have this. Don't you have anything better
to
do?
Yes.
Which is the perfect plat name. Yeah. And what game is that from, Mindy?
That's from Undertale.
Yep.
It is, which is also a good game too. So it's a double win there. So thank you for joining us, listeners, today. Now, Darrell, if we're trying to find you, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me with the PG Spoilers podcast. You can go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. I don't think we're on Podbean, but I know we're on Castbox, things like that. You can find the podcast there. I'm on Facebook. I don't do a ton of social media. Like, I really have to go out of my way to do some social media stuff. And so the biggest place I try to direct people, if you're just looking to see what I'm doing and what I'm in and maybe have some contact with me, is just PSN. I'm ResidentDarrell on PSN. I'm ResidentDarrell on the Xbox. I used to Twitch stream a little bit. I was ResidentDarrell there. I try to keep it simple, but yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And Mindy, where can we find you?
Twitter at The Mind is a City. I'm also on PlayStationTrophies.org. I'm on the guide team over there, so if you want to try writing trophy guides, hit me up. I will help you out. Also, if you want to support my guide writing, you can leave me a tip at ko-fi.com/The Mind is a City. No subscriptions or anything, just, whenever you want to say thank you.
Fantastic. And if you're trying to find the show, it does have its own Twitter at Push2Plat. Push2Plat. It sounds like it's running it, doesn't it, when I say that? I like it. You feel free to drop by, say hi, leave a comment or a question if you like. We also have the PlayStation community, the PS4 community, and we have to give a shout out this week, just one, to Drinking_Glue, who got his 70th Platinum Bouncy Bullets, and he put awful controls, definitely not stacking that one. And look, I would agree with you, but unfortunately I did. I think you're on the right page there. The show is available on iTunes Podcast, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, and Spotify, plus a ton of other ones that who knows what they are, but they're there. Thank you again, listeners. If you did enjoy today's episode, or if you did find some of that musical talk interesting, by all means, check it out. Have a listen to the songs now, because sometimes knowing a little bit about it or getting some recommendations is the most exciting thing when you talk to people that are musically inclined. Background. So until next week, thank you very much, listeners. Thank you, Darrell and Mindy.
Thank you guys for having me.